The security camera in Courtroom 3B captured something at exactly 9:47 a.m. that would destroy a woman's entire life in less than 8 minutes. Jennifer Parker, a 35-year-old real estate agent who had spent her entire adult life using money to escape consequences, slid a white envelope containing $5,000 in cash across the clerk's desk. What she whispered next would become the most damning piece of evidence in what Judge Judy would later call the most brazen act of courtroom corruption she had witnessed in 35 years on the bench. The footage of those 7 seconds would be viewed over 17 million times in the first 48 hours after the episode aired, shared across every social media platform with captions like, "The moment entitlement met justice," and "She tried to bribe Judge Judy's court and instantly regretted it." But here's what makes this story absolutely insane, and what turned it into the most viral courtroom moment in television history. Jennifer Parker didn't just attempt to bribe a court official on camera. She didn't just commit a federal felony punishable by 15 years in prison. What Judge Judy uncovered during her investigation was so much worse, so much more extensive, that it would trigger a multi-state criminal probe and expose a pattern of corruption that had been going on for years. Before we dive into the complete destruction of the most arrogant criminal ever caught on Judge Judy's show, you need to understand exactly who Jennifer Parker was and why she walked into that courtroom with the kind of confidence that could only come from someone who had never faced real consequences for her actions. Jennifer wasn't just another entitled suburban mom who thought the rules didn't apply to her. She was something far more dangerous. She was a woman who had systematically weaponized her wealth and charm to corrupt the legal system itself, leaving a trail of victims who never got justice because she had learned how to buy her way out of accountability. This was a woman who had beaten a DUI charge 3 years earlier through mysterious circumstances that resulted in evidence disappearing. This was a woman who had settled a sexual harassment complaint from a former employee with a cash payment and a non-disclosure agreement that protected her real estate license. This was a woman who had been sued 17 times in her career and somehow managed to win or settle every single case under circumstances that always seemed just a little too convenient, just a little too favorable for someone with her documented history of destructive behavior. The case that brought Jennifer Parker to Judge Judy's courtroom seems straightforward on the surface, almost boring by daytime television standards. Margaret Chen, a 78-year-old woman who had been a landlord for 40 years, was suing Jennifer for $12,000 in property damage. Jennifer had rented one of Margaret's properties, a modest 3-bedroom house in a quiet suburban neighborhood, with a lease agreement that explicitly prohibited subletting, pets, and unauthorized modifications. Within 6 months, Jennifer had violated every single term of that lease, and then some. She had illegally sublet the property to 3 different tenants without Margaret's knowledge or permission, collecting rent from all of them while paying Margaret only her original lease amount. She had allowed those subtenants to keep multiple large dogs that destroyed the hardwood floors, chewed through door frames, and left the entire house reeking of animal waste. She had authorized extensive, unauthorized renovations that included knocking down a load-bearing wall, installing fixtures that violated building codes, and painting over original woodwork that had been maintained for decades. When Margaret finally discovered what was happening and tried to evict Jennifer, she returned to find her property destroyed beyond anything she had seen in 4 decades of rental management. Margaret Chen had brought meticulous documentation to court. She had photographs showing every room of her house before Jennifer moved in pristine condition with beautiful original features and well-maintained systems. She had photographs taken after Jennifer's tenancy, showing holes in walls, destroyed flooring, broken appliances, ruined fixtures, and evidence of building code violations that would cost thousands to remedy. She had receipts from contractors totaling exactly $12,347 to restore the property to rentable condition. She had copies of the lease agreement Jennifer had signed, with Jennifer's signature clearly visible on every page that outlined the prohibitions Jennifer had violated. She had testimony from neighbors who had witnessed the constant flow of subtenants, the noise complaints, and the obvious neglect of the property. She had everything she needed to win this case easily, and Judge Judy's producers had scheduled it as a quick 15-minute segment because the evidence was so overwhelming. What nobody knew, what Margaret Chin herself couldn't have imagined, was that Jennifer Parker had spent 3 hours before the court session executing a plan that would turn a simple property damage case into a federal criminal investigation that would dominate news cycles for weeks. Jennifer Parker had arrived at the courthouse at 6:30 that morning, a full 3 hours before her scheduled court time. This wasn't nervousness or preparation. This was reconnaissance. She had parked her Mercedes in the visitor lot and spent 20 minutes in her car applying makeup with the precision of someone preparing for a performance, checking her designer outfit in the mirror, and most importantly, counting the cash she had withdrawn from 3 different ATM machines the night before to avoid triggering any bank reporting requirements. $5,000 in $100 bills, neatly stacked and placed in an unmarked white envelope that she tucked into her Prada handbag, alongside her fabricated evidence and carefully rehearsed lies. She had done this before, not in Judge Judy's courtroom, but in 3 other civil cases over the past 5 years. A slip of cash to a clerk here, a generous gift to a court administrator there, always accompanied by carefully worded suggestions about making sure the judge saw things from her perspective. It had worked every single time, because Jennifer had learned something that most people never figured out. The legal system wasn't just about evidence and arguments. It was about relationships, access, and knowing which people to approach when nobody was watching. David Martinez had been a court clerk for Judge Judy's show for 15 years. He had processed thousands of cases, handled countless litigants, and seen every variety of human behavior that courtroom stress could produce. He had seen people cry, scream, beg, threaten, and collapse under the weight of their own lies. But in all those years, he had never been directly offered a bribe until Jennifer Parker approached his desk at 9:47 a.m. with an envelope and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. David was reviewing case files for the morning session when Jennifer appeared, glancing around the hallway with the calculated casualness of someone checking for witnesses. She started with small talk, asking about how long he had worked there, commenting on how professional everything seemed, complimenting the efficiency of the court system. David had responded with polite but minimal answers, his internal alarm bells already ringing because experienced court personnel develop an instinct for when someone is working up to something inappropriate. Then Jennifer leaned closer, lowered her voice to barely above a whisper, and said something that David would later repeat word for word. She said this was just a misunderstanding between her and an elderly landlord who was confused about the property condition, that she had evidence that would make everything clear, and that she wanted to make sure Judge Judy understood the situation properly from the beginning. David had maintained his professional demeanor, his face showing nothing, but his mind was already racing through the protocol for this exact situation. Then Jennifer slid the envelope across his desk, her perfectly manicured hand leaving it positioned directly in front of him, and she spoke the words that the security camera audio would capture with devastating clarity. She said this was a thank you for his excellent service, that she appreciated people who understood how things really worked, and that maybe he could just make sure her evidence was presented first so the judge could see the full picture before hearing from a confused old woman who probably didn't remember things correctly. David looked down at the envelope, looked back up at Jennifer's expectant face, and said in a clear, steady voice that he could not accept this. Jennifer's smile never wavered. She pushed the envelope closer and said it wasn't a bribe. It was a gift, that nobody needed to know about it, that she was just being generous to someone who worked hard. She actually added that $5,000 was nothing to her, just a small token of appreciation, and that she was sure someone on a clerk's salary could use a little extra money. That last comment, dripping with condescension and contempt for anyone who made less money than she did, was the moment David Martinez made his decision not just to refuse the bribe, but to ensure that Jennifer Parker faced every possible consequence for attempting it. David had given a subtle hand signal to courthouse security, a gesture that Jennifer completely missed because she was too focused on what she thought was her successful corruption of the system. He told Jennifer he needed to process some paperwork and asked her to wait in the hallway. The moment she turned away, David secured the envelope in an evidence bag, contacted his supervisor, and initiated a protocol that would involve courthouse security, the show's legal team, and ultimately Judge Judy herself. Within 15 minutes, everyone who needed to know about the bribery attempt knew about it. Within 30 minutes, the security footage had been reviewed, the audio had been isolated and enhanced, and the decision had been made to let Jennifer Parker walk into that courtroom thinking her plan had worked. Judge Judy had been informed of the situation before she took the bench, and anyone who knew her could have predicted exactly what was about to happen. She wasn't just going to rule against Jennifer Parker. She was going to make an example of her that would echo through legal history and remind every entitled criminal that some judges cannot be bought, intimidated, or manipulated. Jennifer Parker walked into Judge Judy's courtroom at exactly 10:15 a.m. with the kind of confidence that can only come from someone who genuinely believes they have rigged the game in their favor. She had changed from her earlier outfit into an even more expensive ensemble, a tailored navy suit that screamed professional success, pearl earrings that cost more than most people's monthly rent, and shoes that clicked against the courtroom floor with the authoritative sound of someone who had never been told no in any meaningful way. She carried her leather portfolio like a shield, filled with documents she had carefully selected, and in some cases fabricated, to support her version of events. As she took her position at the defendant's table, she actually made eye contact with David Martinez at the clerk's desk and gave him a subtle smile and nod, a gesture of acknowledgement between co-conspirators that she believed they now were. David's face remained completely neutral, showing nothing of the storm that was about to break over her head. Jennifer had no idea that the envelope she had given him was now sitting in an evidence bag in Judge Judy's chambers. She had no idea that the security footage had been reviewed by multiple people. She had no idea that she wasn't walking into a civil case about property damage anymore. She was walking into a trap that would destroy everything she had spent her entire adult life building. Margaret Chin sat in the plaintiff's chair, looking every bit of her 78 years. Tired, worried, and carrying the weight of someone who had been financially devastated by someone she had trusted. She wore a simple dress, sensible shoes, and no jewelry except for her wedding ring from a husband who had passed away 5 years earlier. In her lap, she held a folder that contained the evidence of her case, photographs and receipts, organized with the meticulous care of someone who had spent 40 years managing rental properties and documenting everything. When Judge Judy entered the courtroom and everyone rose, Margaret struggled slightly to stand, her arthritis making the movement painful. Jennifer remained perfectly poised, radiating the false confidence of someone who thought they had purchased a favorable outcome. The bailiff called the case, Margaret Chin versus Jennifer Parker, property damage claim, in the amount of $12,000. Judge Judy took her seat, arranged her notes with deliberate precision, and looked directly at Jennifer with an expression that experienced viewers of the show would recognize as the calm before an absolutely devastating storm. But Jennifer, blinded by her own arrogance and convinced her bribe had secured her safety, interpreted that look as simple judicial attentiveness. Margaret Chin's testimony was heartbreaking in its simplicity and honesty. She explained that she had been a landlord for 40 decades, that she had always treated her tenants fairly and maintained her properties with pride, and that Jennifer Parker had been the worst tenant she had ever encountered in all those years. Her voice trembled as she described returning to her property after Jennifer's eviction to find destruction that had made her physically ill. She showed photographs that told the story more powerfully than words ever could. Beautiful hardwood floors that had been maintained for 30 years, now gouged and stained beyond repair. Original crown molding that had survived since the house was built in 1962, now chewed by dogs and ripped from walls. A kitchen that had been spotless, now with broken cabinets, non-functional appliances, and evidence of grease fires that had never been reported. A bathroom where someone had attempted to install a jacuzzi tub without permits or professional help, resulting in water damage that had rotted through subflooring and threatened the structural integrity of the entire room.
Margaret's hand shook as she presented contractor estimates, each one itemized and documented, showing that restoring the property to rentable condition would cost $12,347. She explained that she was on a fixed income, that this property had been her retirement investment, and that Jennifer's actions had not just cost her money, but had violated the trust that made her business possible for 40 years. Judge Judy listened to Margaret's testimony with focused attention, asking clarifying questions that demonstrated her complete understanding of property law and landlord-tenant relationships. She examined each photograph carefully, reviewed each receipt thoroughly, and made notes with the precision of someone building an ironclad legal record. Then she turned her attention to Jennifer Parker, and anyone watching could see the temperature in the courtroom dropped several degrees. Judge Judy asked Jennifer to explain her version of events, to tell the court why she believed she didn't owe Margaret Chin $12,000 for documented property damage. Jennifer's response was a masterclass in entitled arrogance wrapped in fake victimhood. She claimed that Margaret was exaggerating the damage, that the property had already been in poor condition when she moved in, that Margaret was a confused elderly woman who didn't understand that normal wear and tear was expected in rental properties. She actually used the phrase normal wear and tear to describe holes in walls and destroyed flooring. She suggested that Margaret was trying to take advantage of the court system to get free renovations paid for by someone with deeper pockets. She rolled her eyes when Judge Judy pressed her on specific damages, sighing dramatically as if dealing with someone who simply didn't understand how the real world worked. Judge Judy let Jennifer finish her condescending explanation about normal wear and tear, allowed her to complete her dismissive characterization of Margaret as a confused old woman, and even permitted her to present her fabricated evidence with the kind of patience that veteran viewers of the show knew something explosive was about to come. Jennifer was actually smiling as she concluded her defense, confident that her earlier investment in courthouse corruption was about to pay dividends. She glanced again at David Martinez,
still expecting some signal that her bribe had secured favorable treatment, still completely oblivious to the fact that every person in that courtroom except her knew exactly what was about to happen. Judge Judy leaned back in her chair, steepled her fingers in front of her face, and allowed a moment of silence to stretch across the courtroom like the calm before a hurricane makes landfall. Then she leaned forward, and her voice took on the dangerous, quiet tone that anyone familiar with her show recognized as the signal that someone's entire world was about to collapse. She said that before she ruled on the property damage case, there was another matter that needed to be addressed, something that had occurred earlier that morning that was far more serious than $12,000 in rental property destruction. Jennifer's confident smile flickered for just a moment, a barely perceptible crack in her facade, but she recovered quickly because she still didn't understand the magnitude of what was coming. Judge Judy reached beneath her bench and produced a clear evidence bag containing a white envelope, holding it up so the courtroom cameras could capture it in perfect detail. She stated that at approximately 9:47 a.m. that morning, Jennifer Parker had approached the court clerk's desk and attempted to bribe a court official with $5,000 in cash. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Jennifer's face went through a transformation that the cameras captured in excruciating detail. First, confusion, as if she couldn't quite process what she had just heard. Then, recognition, as her brain caught up with the reality of her situation. Then absolute terror as the full weight of federal felony charges crashed down on her carefully constructed world of privilege and purchased immunity. The color didn't just drain from her face, it evaporated, leaving her looking like a wax figure melting under hot lights. Her mouth opened and closed several times, but no sound came out because her vocal cords had apparently forgotten how to function. Her hands, which had been resting confidently on the defendant's table, began to tremble so violently that papers in front of her started to rustle. Judge Judy wasn't finished. She explained in precise legal detail exactly what Jennifer had done. She described how Jennifer had approached David Martinez, initiated a conversation designed to establish rapport, and then produced an envelope containing exactly $5,000 in cash. She noted that the bills were all hundreds, suggesting premeditation rather than impulse. She revealed that the entire exchange had been captured on courthouse security cameras, with audio so clear that every word Jennifer whispered could be heard, and would be heard by federal prosecutors. Then, Judge Judy did something that elevated this moment from courtroom drama to legal legend. She played the audio recording for everyone in the courtroom to hear. Jennifer's voice came through the speakers, artificially friendly at first, then dropping to a conspiratorial whisper as she offered the money and suggested that David could make sure Judge Judy saw things properly. The most damning moment came when Jennifer said that $5,000 was nothing to her, and that surely someone on a clerk's salary could use the extra money. That sentence, dripping with contempt for anyone who earned less than she did, captured everything about who Jennifer Parker really was. She wasn't just corrupt, she was contemptuous of the very people whose integrity made the justice system function. Jennifer finally found her voice, and what came out was exactly what Judge Judy and everyone watching expected: denial, excuses, reframing, and ultimately the desperate backpedaling of someone who had finally encountered consequences she couldn't buy her way out of. Jennifer stammered that it wasn't a bribe, it was a gift, a thank you for excellent service. Judge Judy cut her off with surgical precision, asking what service David had provided before Jennifer gave him the money, asking why Jennifer had told him to make sure her evidence was seen first, asking why she had specifically said that nobody needed to know about the transaction. Jennifer's attempts to answer these questions dissolved into incoherent fragments of sentences that contradicted each other within seconds. She claimed she was just being generous, then claimed it was a misunderstanding, then claimed she hadn't meant anything improper, cycling through explanations like someone drowning and grabbing at anything that might keep them afloat for even one more second. Judge Judy destroyed each excuse as quickly as Jennifer produced it, using Jennifer's own recorded words against her with the precision of a prosecutor who had spent decades perfecting the art of exposing liars. Then, Judge Judy did something that made Jennifer's situation infinitely worse. She explained that this bribery attempt had prompted an investigation into Jennifer's legal history, and what that investigation had uncovered was a pattern of suspiciously favorable outcomes in cases where Jennifer should have lost. Judge Judy laid out the results of her investigation with the methodical precision of someone building a criminal case that would hold up in federal court. She revealed that Jennifer Parker had been sued 17 times over the past 8 years, and in 14 of those cases, she had achieved outcomes that were statistically improbable given the strength of the evidence against her. 3 cases had been dismissed on technicalities that experienced attorneys found suspicious. 4 cases had resulted in settlements far below what plaintiffs should have received given documented damages. 7 cases had resulted in verdicts that contradicted clear photographic and testimonial evidence. Judge Judy explained that she had contacted court administrators in 3 different jurisdictions where Jennifer had faced litigation, and all 3 were now launching internal investigations into potential corruption involving court personnel who had access to case files and judicial calendars. The implication was clear and devastating. Jennifer Parker hadn't just attempted to bribe one clerk in one case. She had been systematically corrupting the judicial system for years, leaving behind a trail of victims who never received justice because she had learned how to buy favorable outcomes. Margaret Chen sat in the plaintiff's chair with tears streaming down her face, realizing that she had almost become victim number 18, another elderly person destroyed by someone who treated the legal system like a game she could win with enough money. Judge Judy's ruling on the original property damage case was swift and absolute. She found in favor of Margaret Chen for the full $12,347 in documented damages,
plus an additional $8,000 in punitive damages for what Judge Judy characterized as Jennifer's malicious and deliberate destruction of property combined with her complete lack of remorse or accountability. But that financial judgment was nothing compared to what came next. Judge Judy announced that she was referring Jennifer's bribery attempt to the United States Attorney's Office for immediate prosecution. She explained that bribing a court official was a federal felony under Title 18 United States Code Section 2011, punishable by up to 15 years in federal prison and fines up to 3 times the monetary value of the bribe. She noted that Jennifer's own words on the security recording constituted a full confession that would make prosecution straightforward and conviction virtually certain. Then Judge Judy delivered the final devastating blow. She revealed that she had already contacted the State Real Estate Licensing Board and provided them with evidence of Jennifer's criminal conduct, which would result in immediate suspension of her license pending a revocation hearing that Jennifer would certainly lose. A convicted felon could not hold a real estate license in any state. Jennifer's career, the source of her wealth and the foundation of her identity, was over the moment she slid that envelope across David Martinez's desk. The transformation in Jennifer Parker over the next 60 seconds was so complete that it became the most replayed moment in Judge Judy history. The arrogant, condescending woman who had walked into the courtroom radiating false confidence literally collapsed in her chair, her body folding in on itself as the full magnitude of her destruction became undeniable. She began sobbing with the kind of raw, ugly desperation that comes from someone whose entire life is disintegrating in real time. She begged Judge Judy for mercy, claiming she had children who needed her, claiming she had made a terrible mistake, claiming she didn't understand what she was doing. Judge Judy's response was colder than Arctic wind. She pointed out that Jennifer had clearly understood exactly what she was doing when she withdrew $5,000 from multiple ATMs to avoid detection, when she arrived 3 hours early to find the right moment to approach the clerk, when she specifically told David Martinez that nobody needed to know about their transaction. These were the actions of someone who knew precisely how illegal their behavior was and had carefully planned to avoid getting caught. The tears Jennifer was crying now weren't tears of remorse for her actions. They were tears of self-pity, because for the first time in her privileged life, she was facing consequences she couldn't buy, charm, or manipulate her way out of. The bailiff escorted Jennifer from the courtroom as she continued to sob, her designer outfit now rumpled and stained with tears, her carefully applied makeup running down her face in dark streaks that made her look like a melting portrait of entitlement. Margaret Chen remained seated, clutching her folder of evidence, looking stunned by the vindication she had just witnessed. David Martinez, the clerk whose integrity had triggered this entire sequence of events, was called forward by Judge Judy and publicly commended for his professionalism and his refusal to compromise the justice system for any amount of money. The courtroom erupted in spontaneous applause, something that rarely happened in Judge Judy's court because she typically maintained strict decorum. But this moment was different. Everyone present understood they had witnessed something more than a legal ruling. They had witnessed the complete destruction of a criminal who had spent years corrupting the system, brought down by one judge who couldn't be bought and one clerk who refused to be compromised. Within hours of the episode airing, the video had gone viral across every social media platform, accumulating 17 million views in the first 48 hours and spawning countless reaction videos, legal analyses, and discussions about corruption in the civil court system. Jennifer Parker's name became synonymous with entitled criminality. Her face became a meme representing everyone who thinks money makes them untouchable. And her spectacular downfall became a cultural moment that restored millions of people's faith that justice could still triumph over corruption. Judge Judy's handling of the case was studied in law schools as an example of judicial authority and in ethics courses as a demonstration of why integrity matters more than personal gain. 6 months later, Jennifer Parker pleaded guilty to federal bribery charges and was sentenced to 4 years in federal prison.
her real estate empire liquidated to pay restitution to the victims she had defrauded over the years, her children in the custody of her ex-husband who had filed for divorce the day after the episode aired. Margaret Chen used her judgment money to repair her property and continued her work as a landlord, now celebrated in her community as the woman who helped bring down a corrupt system. And David Martinez continued his work as a court clerk, his integrity validated and his commitment to justice proven in the most public way possible. The lesson was clear and eternal. In Judge Judy's courtroom, justice is not for sale, and those who try to buy it will pay a price far higher than any bribe they could ever offer.